Hi, I'm Dr. Didi Claassen. I'm a product manager for the livestock unit at AfriVet. It's a company, a South African-based company, that's all about animal health. We literally say animal health is in our DNA, and it's a great privilege to chat to you today about traceability and One Health. And both these concepts are really close to my heart. So I'm looking forward to telling you more about this. So let's start with traceability. This is a photo or a picture of a map that we use for disease tracing. This little red dot is Jacobsdal, and it is in the Free State province, and this represents Rift Valley fever outbreak that we had in 2018, and it's a single outbreak of the disease. I don't know if you guys were around or remember the outbreak of Rift Valley fever in 2009, 2010. A lot of animals died, a lot of animals aborted, and 7 people also died. So it's a really important disease, and we need to know where we have outbreaks. So in 2018, we only had the single case, and it was due to increased rainfall in the Jacobsdal area on that specific farm. And the only way to prevent this disease is through vaccination. Here's another map. This is in the Limpopo province, and I think a lot of people literally hate this map. It's of the FMD outbreak, foot and mouth disease outbreak in the Limpopo province that started last year and is still continuing. And there are specific areas in South Africa, more or less here, where we have controlled areas, and then the moment the disease steps out of or moves out of our controlled area, we have to report it to the international controlling bodies or regulating bodies, and then they stop our exports, which they did, and it cost our country billions of rands, and it's still affecting our country because we're no longer foot and mouth disease free. And these are the control areas where they tried to stop it with the outbreak last year, and now we can see it moved out. So this is where traceability becomes really important. If we had an effective traceability system in the country, we would have been able to stop this much sooner, picked it up better, and control it so much sooner, if that makes sense. This is another disease outbreak map. This is what it looks like when we report diseases to the OIE. That's the animal health, basically like the World Health Organization for people, but for animals. And this was African swine fever outbreak. So again, we have a control area here in the Limpopo province. So anything outside the control area needs to be reported. And this was in Gauteng, Free State, Northwest, and Mpumalanga. So these animals needed to be traced, where they came from, and also where animals at these auctions went to, so that we can effectively control the disease and stop it. We recently had an outbreak here in the Eastern Cape province, so we need to find out where it came from to stop losses. Basically, you can have up to 100% mortality, that is deaths in your herd, with African swine fever. So it's a really trade-sensitive disease, and other countries don't want it at all. So it affects our exports as well. So on this slide, in the OIE, set some standards in 2006 to say what are the minimum requirements for traceability in any country. So firstly, they said you need to be able to identify the animals or the animal groups. Secondly, you need to know where they're going. So you need to trace those movements. If you have an animal that is born in Cape Town and now the farmer sells it to someone in Polokwane, we need to know this animal was born in Cape Town and now it's in Polokwane and exactly where it moved. So if it picked up a disease in Cape Town and it goes through to Polokwane, we know, it stopped over in Bloemfontein, and some bloom animals might be affected as well. Then also you need to identify those properties. So where in Cape Town is this farm and where in Polokwane is this farm? And then lastly, we need to have a register, a national register. So all this information needs to be accessible. So if Tannie Sunny in Bloemfontein feels her cattle might have been involved in an FMD case, she can access this database and say, oh wait, these animals didn't come close to her animals. So we need to record this information somewhere, and it needs to be accessible. So those are the minimum requirements for a traceability system. So what are the benefits? Why do we care? So as I've shown you with the maps, disease prevention and control. We need to know where the diseases are coming from, which animals are affected, and where they're going, and we won't be able to know that if we can't identify and trace these animals. Then food safety. We always hear about food security. We need to produce food for the people. We need to produce food for the people, and that's great. It's really important, but we need to produce safe food for people. So we inject inject animals with medication, antibiotics. We treat them for ticks, and there are withdrawal periods on those products. So to make sure that you don't feed someone meat or milk that came from animals that haven't adhered to the withdrawal periods is really important. So that food needs to be safe. You guys will remember the listeriosis outbreak of a few years ago where people died. That's also food safety. So if we could trace the meat, where it came from, what farms it originated from, which factories or processing plants it went to, we would be able to stop outbreaks much sooner and prevent them. So food safety, not only security. And then fair trade and industry. Because the foot and mouth disease outbreak is an excellent example of the economic destruction that a disease outbreak can cause, and the lack of an traceability system. So for fair trade, so that we can export our meat, our milk, our hides, live animals, we need a traceability system. And it's only fair to the other countries. They don't want foot and mouth disease, and I hope we don't want to give it to them. So for us to certify that we don't have the diseases, or that these animals came from farms, or these animal products came from areas without certain diseases, we need a traceability system. And then we'll be able to export to other countries. And it's not a far-fetched idea. Our neighboring country, Namibia, earlier this year was successful in exporting beef to America. And America, the USA, is one of the most difficult countries to export anything to with regards to agricultural products. So that was quite a feat in itself, and we can also achieve that if we work together. So what are the requirements? We firstly need a central committee to run this traceability system. There needs to be officials from government, so state official, and then also private industry, our stakeholders, our farmers, our veterinarians, they all need to be involved. And we need to standardize our identification method, and it must be OIE approved. So we need to look at a method that all people can apply, whether they're emerging farmers or commercial farmers, and then it needs to be enforced. It doesn't help that Umyani does it and Umpit does, and then there's no benefit for Umpit, and Umyani gets away with spreading disease or limiting our export ability. So enforcement is really important. Okay, so I looked at the different types of animal identification. So you can tag an ear, you can tattoo an ear. The problem with tattooing is it only works in animal with a light skin. If it's darker skin, you can't see the tattoo ink. Number tagging is really funny. I thought it was quite interesting. So it's literally like a chain with a number around its neck. So it looks like a gangster cow, but unfortunately those things can fall off, and then you lose the ability to identify the animal. Branding is another way. So these are some branding irons. These look very American, but this is actually one of our laws in South Africa. The Animal Identification Act stipulates that all animals need to be branded in South Africa, and your small stock needs to be tattooed. So this is currently what we're using, but it's not OIE approved. And then ear notching, we all know. And then microchipping, I get a lot of questions about that. Microchipping is great. We're using it in the buffalo industry to identify buffalo, but it's expensive. Microchips stop functioning, and then they also migrate. So I've done a lot of buffalo postmortems for insurance purposes where we can't find the microchip, or people double chip animals, and it is expensive. So you can't make this enforceable for emerging as well as commercial farmers. So the OIE suggests ear tagging. Okay, so what type of tags do you get? You get visual tags. So this is a good example. It's a tag you can write with a Koki pen on it, or you can have a fancy schmancy one like this where you print the number on. And then we also have integrated tags. So integrated tags, I have a photo of at the end of the presentation. It's one of the better known ones are the RFID tags. It's radio frequency identification. So it's like a little coil inside this tag, and the moment you bring the reader close to it, it activates it and has a little ID number that's unique to that animal. And that tag can literally go all the way to the abattoir and then be reused for another animal. And they're usually supposed to be tamper-proof, so they work really well. And you can integrate it in your farming system. So people can, every time you get scales that can read the tag, you can literally have so much information as that this little lamb was the second conception on that lamb. This is the father. There's so much much information that can be linked with computer systems to a single ID number. So that's really great, and that's what Namibia is currently using. All of their animals are identified with RFID tags. So let's quickly talk about One Health. This is one of my biggest passions. This is a triad. I hope you all have heard of One Health. So it's where we all work together to keep the human population, the animal population, and the environment safe. So if one of those drop, diseases start break out, like we saw with COVID, for example. So important parts of One Health communication. I'm just adding the National Animal Health Forum logo here. That's a website you guys can follow if you want to stay abreast with anything that's happening in the animal health sector in South Africa. They're doing a great job in keeping us informed. But you can see also their logo consists of 3 chains, and this is to do with One Health. So health side, vet, I'm not just referring to veterinarians, I'm talking to anyone in the animal sector involved with keeping animals healthy. So that's farmers, industry, animal health technicians, you name it. So I just meant veterinary services, and then the owners. And then this is further broken down to private and state entities, and then also emerging and commercial. And the biggest difference here is your emerging farmers have smaller numbers of animals, and they're usually not as affluent to be able to pay for everything that the commercial farmers are more likely able to afford. So that's something to keep in mind in these communication channels. And if communication breaks down between any of these entities, people can die, animals can die, and we can lose a lot of money for our economy. So these are important entities. And if you're on the agricultural sector, you'll fall in this area. So it's important to be involved with your state veterinary services, your state agricultural services, but as well as the private sector. And then to keep communication with health open. So an example of this, again, our Rift Valley fever outbreak. I was a state vet at that stage in the Free State. We had the outbreak of sheep, and we forgot to let the human side know. So there were 3 days where, that we were only treating the animals. And then the Department of Health found out. They came and they looked at the people. Luckily, no one died. But it's important that we communicate, learn from our mistakes, don't let it happen again, and don't let people die. But also, now the human side or the Department of Health can trace the people that were involved, and we need to trace the animals. Were any animals brought in, or did any animals leave this farm, and which could potentially spread the disease? So One Health, all of us working together, and then obviously the farmer doing his part to vaccinate, make sure his animals are vaccinated, and then also to inform his neighbors that the disease doesn't spread further. Okay, so lastly, what is our way forward with regards to traceability? We had a stakeholder information session in January, and the University of Pretoria is working on a business plan, and we're now in September. As yet, I've not heard that it's been released, but it's on its way. So we'll be able to implement that strat plan for South Africa to start an effective traceability system. So I'm super excited about that, because without it, we're just going to keep on walking in circles. So who needs to be involved? Eventually everyone. So anyone from any farmer up until the tannie who buys a sheep for scalp choppies from Woolworths, she needs to know, where did her meat come from? Is this safe? Is it adhering to certain specifications? And I know there's a lot of overseas countries where there's a little code on the package strip of what you're buying, whether it's your scalp choppies for Heritage Day, and then you can trace back to what farm that sheep came from, and you can see if they're doing everything right. So that's a great traceability system, and we can strive to that, but it won't work if everyone isn't involved. So you guys are at the brink of starting your career. So where can you get involved, and what avenues can you pursue? So I'm taking you back to the basic requirements, and with any entrepreneurial idea, you need to identify a need and see how you can feed that need to start a career. And we have a lot of good examples of that with the COVID outbreak. People started making masks because there was a need. So, for example, you can do the same on this side. So use your background and start feeding the need for traceability. It's going to be a big thing. We need to implement it. So there's definitely a need. So perhaps you can get involved with the identification of animals, looking into developing tags, selling tags, placing tags, traceability. I think with the fourth industrial revolution, everything is going to be a lot more automated. So you can perhaps get involved with that side. The same with identification of properties. I used to have this huge map from the 1980s in my office as a state vet with all the little farm numbers, but I couldn't use it because everything changed. So if someone can update those systems and make it more accessible, that it's not just paperwork and old maps, it would be great. And then also the national database, it needs to be written, it needs to be run and manned. So that would be great. And then lastly, One Health is not part of that list of standards, but it's definitely a place we all can get involved in, even if it's educating people on the risks of diseases like rabies, Rift Valley fever. Foot and mouth disease is not a zoonosis per se, but it can affect human lives because people lose their jobs, etc. So education is a big part, and then also to work together with the other entities in our industry. That's the Department of Health, the owners, and your colleagues in the veterinary side. So that's my story. Here is a photo of the tags. These are the RFID tags. You see there are these small yellow round ones, and they all have a unique identification number. If you guys have any questions, you are welcome to email me here, and then I'd love to answer them. Thank you very much.